everybody, and thanks for joining me on another episode of Straight Jacket White Rabbit. As usual, my name's Adam, and I'll be your host. Just got back from a family vacation, you guys. We went up and went camping out by the lake, had an awesome time for my son Alexander's ninth birthday. I did read him you guys' his birthday wishes. He said to tell you guys thanks so much. He was very happy to see all of the happy birthday wishes. So we're back now. And I wanted to do a show that was kind of near and dear to me, something I enjoyed talking about, um, other than the norm. So, what I'm going to be talking to you about today is Egypt, more specifically, the pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx. Now, according to mainstream archaeology, the pyramids of Giza were built by the pharaoh Khufu roughly 5,000 years ago. For those of you who have not been to the Great Pyramids, pictures don't really do it justice. This thing is enormous. The blocks are enormous. The sheer size of this megalithic structure sets 90% of the people that go to it in awe. I mean, they're just, wow. And it's because, for good reason, you guys, this thing is immense. I mean, it is absolutely, there's no other word for it but colossally big. I mean, it's just that huge. And they all are. They're very, very large structures, you guys. Now, the problem here is I don't believe that these things were built by Khufu. I do believe that they were maintained and possibly even slightly restored by Khufu. But let me tell you why. Number one, most people don't realize that 95% of everything you've ever heard about the pyramids and the Sphinx, 95% are educated guesses and theories. They're not fact. Matter of fact, one of the very very few pieces of evidence that links Khufu to the construction of the pyramids was just a simple piece, keep in mind, not the whole thing, of papyrus that talked about Khufu having these granite blocks moved to the Giza plateau. They don't say which blocks, they don't say where, they don't say for what construction. And you guys, this was an all the time occurrence. People were constantly having blocks. Now, were they the huge blocks that built the pyramid? No. But pharaohs were constantly moving blocks from these quarries. That's why these quarries existed. That's how they built all of these other architectural wonders that they built that were within their means. Absolutely. I'm not saying they didn't build anything. We know the Egyptians were builders, you guys. Like Karnak. We know they built Karnak. I am perfectly okay with that. But that's what I'm saying is this doesn't link him to being the one who ordered the pyramids being made. That's ridiculous. All you have is a piece of papyrus that talks about him having stones moved to Giza. And people go, well, what else would they move it to the Giza Plateau for if it wasn't for the pyramids? There's lots of structures at the Giza Plateau, you guys. There's other pyramids, quite frankly, that look a lot more shoddy, and they're the older type versions of the step pyramids, or at least if you go by modern accounts. They believe these are the older pyramids and they just got better at building as time went there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of buildings that are still buried within the sand, you guys. So just because he was moving blocks to the Giza Plateau does not mean that he was the builder and architect of the Great Pyramids. It's ridiculous, you guys. And his body's never been found. His body was never recovered there. There was no ornate artwork or gold and jewels and other personal belongings like in every other tomb archaeologists have ever discovered. Look it up. There's zero there that makes this a tomb. There were none of, I mean, keep in mind, these were not whim things. These were not like just a whim of the people. Oh, I want to be buried with this. They had a belief system of taking things with them to the other side. They had a belief system of large, prominent burial sites, full mosaics and hieroglyphic stories of their lives lives, and or hieroglyphs depicting the stories of their lives. And I mean, dolls for children, perfume vials for women, work tools for the men that showed what they did in their life. All kinds of this stuff is shoved into these tombs, you guys, and I mean crammed. Those of you who've ever seen a tomb opened on air, they've only done a few of them in my lifetime, but they have done some. It's full of stuff. They constantly are finding things, coins and money, or coins, money, jewels, jewelry, dolls, vases. I mean, all kinds of stuff. There was nothing where one of the most prominent people in Egyptian history, who supposedly built these pyramids, there was absolutely nothing inside. And people say, well, looters, looters, we've seen, you guys, we've seen grave robbers hit other graves in Egypt. Tons of them. Tons and tons and tons of them. I'm not saying grave robbing doesn't happen, but they don't ever take everything. And not only do they not ever take everything, they darn sure don't scrub the walls and make sure there's no murals or hieroglyphics or anything else, okay? That's an absurdity to say that that's the reason why it was empty. Okay, there would have been other things they wouldn't have taken with them. There would have been paintings on the wall depicting things he did in his life or the afterlife or all these other ceremonial things that Egyptians did. They're not there. To this day, there are still giant empty chambers that we don't even know how to access inside the pyramid that we've discovered. Now, getting off the fact that we don't know for sure that Khufu built this, let's just get on the basics of it, you guys. We've all heard the stories of how they quarried and they rolled these things on logs and pulled them across wet sand because that's supposed to help. And loaded them onto ships, and there were 10,000 workers that worked 20, like, I mean, literally worked for 20 years, where they only took a break one day every 10 days, and this is according to the mainstream archaeological community in Egypt, guys. Um, the main man, actually, of all that being Dr. Zahi Hawass, I believe it's pronounced. Zahi Hawass is basically the godfather in archaeological terms in Egypt. He decides what gets published, who's allowed to dig, who's allowed to do other research in the pyramids, who goes where. He has shut down so many researchers' sites, you guys, so many dig sites, even after people have found substantial artifacts. He has been known to go in and shut them down because their viewpoints on Egyptian history do not mesh with his own. That sounds a lot like rewriting history to me to suit your own version. He's trying to stop other discoveries from coming out. And this is not a me saying this because I'm saying this thing. There is verifiable proof. He has shut down dozens of dig sites on his word alone because he did not agree with the people who were digging there and their vision of ancient Egypt. This is a man who is in it for, I truly believe, the money. He has gotten famous off of his storytelling of how he believes ancient Egyptians were. And the entire culture, the entire province has embraced him and his stories of ancient Egypt. But the fact is they're just stories. There is literally nil proof of 90% of what he says, especially in regards to the Sphinx and the pyramids of Giza. Now, there are a lot of things, like I said, how they move the stones. Scientists are still debating this, guys, because first of all, the time frame they built this pyramid in, 20 years, you're talking a thing that's got an endless number of large stonework blocks that weigh up to, like, I think it's 80 tons. I've worked for construction before, guys, and I have friends that are in construction now who can tell you we have equipment now that would struggle to move these blocks, okay? And some that outright couldn't move these blocks. But you expect me to believe that these 10,000 people dragged these things, this far and that far and onto boats and off of boats and then to the work site and then up to the tops of the pyramid as they build each level higher and higher. And it just doesn't make sense, you guys. Basic physics. Okay, one of the things they talk about when they're talking about building the pyramids is, well, how did they get the blocks up there? And some people say, oh, well, they had some kind of ancient hydraulic pumps or they had all this other stuff. But the mainstream believes that it was done with ramps. The problem with this is it's bull. No ramps have ever been found, not one. And keep in mind, these could not have been made of frigging sand, okay? And it had to support the weight of these blocks. If you made it into sand, they would literally just get lower and lower and lower. You couldn't do it. And or you would risk it sliding because the collapse of one side of the sand. It's not feasible. Scientists have looked into this. It couldn't have been just sand. Well, then you have people saying, well, they did it of stone. Well, they didn't build these giant. Do you have any idea of the slope you would have to build at? It is a very small incremental degree of incline. It would be at or just under 10% incline, you guys. Do you know how bloody long the ramp would have to be? That's absurd. The ramp would have to be miles long. There's no proof of this. There's not a single part of any ramp to these pyramids that has ever been discovered. So how'd they get the stones up there? 80-ton stones. Never mind just a 1-ton stone, but 80-ton stones? I'm going to move on from the stones for a minute, okay? The quarry. Some people have argued about the chiseling out of these obelisks and stuff from the quarry. I'm not even going to argue that. I will give you that slam dunk. Let's say that with your minimalistic copper tools and hard, they had, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I think it starts with a D. It's a type of stone that's very, very hard that they actually used as axes and hammers and things like that. But you're telling me with basically stone tools and copper tools, you chiseled out these big obelisks and blocks and everything else. Fine, I'll give you that. I don't believe it necessarily, but I'll give it to you as a freebie. How do you explain all the core sample drilling? There are perfectly, and I'm talking about within the limit of a human, the thickness of a human hair. There are perfectly cylindrical drill marks through giant granite boulders. And they say, oh, it was done with copper tools and all this other stuff. They've done experiments on this. They say they make a little mark kind of where they want the circle to be, and they use this copper round piece of copper. It's not very thick on the end of this stick, and what they do is they would press it down while turning it until they made a tiny little groove in the stone, which would take hours and hours and hours and hours and hours just for like a millimeter. But then what they do to pick up the speed, which didn't pick it up much, was they would put sand inside the part they already started. And then they do it again, and the sand rubbing around inside would help do this. There are so many reasons why this is ridiculous, guys, that I can't even explain them all to you, but I'll try. Number one, the amount of time you would need to do this with the amount of stone hole drill holes and stuff like that that we know exist in the Giza plateau is ridiculous. I mean, it's an utterly ridiculous amount of time it would take to have these people just going and going and going and going. Even if you use like a bow drill set to kind of spin it to keep it rotating with two people on each end just pulling the bow drill back and forth and spinning this, it would take an ungodly amount of time just to complete one, let alone multiple through feet and feet and feet of solid granite. I'm sorry, but the time frame your official time frame Egypt gave for this does not allow for this type of stuff. I mean, that's ridiculous. 20 years? I don't care if you had 10,000 workers. And let's talk about the workers after the drill core thing. But the next thing on the drill core is there is an actual thread pattern on some of these, okay? You don't get a thread pattern unless what you're drilling with has a thread pattern to it. What they've shown are these tools they've supposedly recovered are these flat pieces of copper pounded out flat and then bent into a circle, which is not very precise. These things are precise, these holes, and then attached to a long staffed stick so that they can rotate it or bow drill it and make a drill. But that doesn't cause the telltale threading marks that we know, like when we use a drill that's nowadays. When you screw like a screw into something, you use a drill, there's drill marks, there's bore marks. And the threading on these suggests that these were machined of some kind. And they laugh it off. And the people like Dr. Zahi, um, Dr. Zahi Hawass is just he's the most egotistical man I've ever listened to. I watched him recently on an episode of Joe Rogan. I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was Joe Rogan. It might not be. Sorry, don't hold me to that. I think it was Joe Rogan. A couple months back, and I think it was Joe Rogan, and he was talking to Joe Rogan, and every other sentence out of this man's mouth is me, I'm, mine. It's all about him. I have never seen such a narcissist in a field of scientific study as this man. And keep in mind, this is the guy that has killed off dozens of archaeological digs because he doesn't agree with their official not towing the party line about ancient Egypt. He has built it up to make ancient Egyptians were the best of the best. And we could do all this stuff that no one else can do. Even people today don't know how he did it. And this man himself claims to believe in magic. And when pressured on this show about his beliefs in magic and possibly them using some kind of magic, or in lieu of magic, I've talked about this before, advanced technology sometimes gets confused for magic. But when he was asked about this, he almost lost his top at Joe Rogan. I mean, he got visibly shaken and upset. The same thing happens when they brought up this new team from Italy that just made the discovery underneath the pyramids of Giza about these cylindrical poles, I'll call them, with the coil or the staircases wrapped around them. We don't know which. Now, I'll get into that here in a minute, but he blew his top about that too. What I want to get into is more proof. We talked about the weight of the blocks and how like utterly impossible it would be to move that many blocks in a 20-year time period, let alone get them all structured in place, mortared up, and all the other things they had to do. There's the time frame they gave is absurd. So the weight, the time frame, the drill cores, the tools used to do all of this stuff, you guys, is just it is very hard to believe. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I am going to say it's highly improbable. Now, the next thing I just said a minute ago I wanted to touch base on was the workers, you guys. The only real official thing that we can find is surprise, surprise, Dr. Hawass's claim that he found inscriptions that said there were 10,000 plus workers doing the pyramids. Okay, 10,000 people. That's them and their families. Yeah, I'm sure they didn't just make these people, all the men uproot their families and whatever. But even if they did, let's just call it an even 10,000 people without their families. You got to feed 10,000 people. Not only do you have to feed 10,000 people daily, but you got to water them. You have to shelter them. You're in the middle of a freezing cold desert at night. None of this has been found. There's no work camps for tens of thousands of people been found on the grounds around this. Now, they've found burial sites around there. I'm not saying they haven't found anything around it, but they have not found anywhere near enough viable buildings or structures or even ancient flooring for buildings or anything like that to suggest there was ever an encampment outside these pyramids of 10,000 Egyptians. It's ridiculous. So, what, did these 10,000 Egyptians wake up at the nearest camp, nearest settlement, nearest town that could support 10,000 people and think about where that would really be? Yet 10,000 people just randomly go, oh, yeah, we're going to live here now. And no, they didn't get up every morning and commute, you know, 5 hours to go work at the pyramids. It didn't happen. The reason you can't find this is because it didn't exist. Okay? The pyramids, I agree with Graham Hancock more than I agree with anyone else on this. I believe the pyramids were from an earlier people. I'm not going to say species yet, but an earlier people. And then it was just kind of co opted by the Egyptians. And once they started doing this, many hundreds of years down the road, yes, during Khufu's reign, I believe what they refer to by him working at the pyramids or working on the pyramids in the very little, like I said, very little points in history that actually say this. They don't say working on the pyramids, but what I think he was doing was restoring things. I think he was working to do restoration work. A lot of people say the same thing about the Sphinx, you guys. The face of the Sphinx, we can tell, used to be something else. There have been parts of it that have been altered, including the headdress and the cobra, which is the only link to that being Khafre, you guys, was the cobra. So if that was added and the real face of the Sphinx was changed, what was it changed from? Once again, you have Egyptians editing their own history. They have a record of doing this, even in their modern, or not their modern day times, but even in the old Egyptian times we know about. There were people that were completely wiped from history, and we know this to be for fact. I'll give you one of the most popular examples was Queen Hatshepsut. Okay, Hatshepsut is the same woman who is now officially. She wasn't for a long, long time. But now we have found out she is the architect who designed, had made, and had posted these two obelisks. And it's just, it was at the beginning of the obelisks were at I forget what temple the obelisks that she made were at. I want to say it was Karnak. It might have been Karnak. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, Karnak. Okay, I thought so. Okay, so Hatshepsut built these he had these huge, I mean they were enormous obelisks, you guys. They're still there. You can look at them and get photos of them and stuff. But she's the one who commissioned these. She's the one who placed them there. And her son, to validate his reign, which he took from her, yes, she was in control. She was a woman pharaoh, which also erased from Egyptian history, you guys, for the most part. They recently made these discoveries within, I think, in the last 15 years, 20 years now. They Her son erased her from history. They took her names off of everything, her markers off of everything. They completely changed the story of where the obelisks came from, that they came from her stepson instead of her. They've literally changed the history of these giant pillars that she was responsible for, these works of art at the beginning of Karnak. They change their history all the time because they don't want someone to have credit for it, or they want credit for it, or whatever. So who's to say Khufu didn't do the same thing with the pyramids, you guys? They were already here. I'll refurbish them a little bit, touch them up with the best way I can, and that's what we'll do. And those will be known as Khufu's pyramids. Moving on to the Sphinx, you guys. Another reason I don't believe the pyramid dating is because the Sphinx dating is completely backwards. There is water damage on the lower side of the Sphinx, you guys, and people say it's wind damage. Okay, there is a big difference for those of you who I'm a desert person. Okay, there is a huge difference between water damage and wind damage. You can visually see the difference. There is prolonged water damage on the Sphinx. The last time, and it's rain damage specifically, not just flood damage. It is rain damage. There's when water just running down the tops of something and it creates the rounded version, smooth rounded versions of the stone. Okay, we know it's rain damage. The last time there was enough rain in the middle of that friggin' desert to do this was over 12,000 years ago, roughly, at the end of the last ice age, well before Khufu. So explain to me the water damage to the Sphinx. And literally within the last year, they've tried to come up with yet another explanation of this. This is like their seventh explanation for this. Keep in mind, their seventh explanation after nobody bought the whole it was wind erosion because it doesn't look at all like wind erosion. But it's like their seventh explanation of this. And now they're saying, oh, well, what we believe they did is they diverted part of the Nile so that it came to and by, apparently hit, the Sphinx. That's flippin' ridiculous. Okay, I'm not saying you can't move waterways, but how are you just now just going to throw that out there? You have no evidence of this. They have absolutely zero evidence that they actually moved the course of the Nile. None. Then you talk about, okay, editing the course of a river isn't that hard by today's standards. We do it all the time to divert rivers. But back then, you're talking about, I mean, that is a monumental undertaking. Then you have to imagine they moved it back. Why would they do that? It's not there now. It didn't correct course on its own. For those of you who've ever seen the signs at a public beach that say don't dig trenches towards the beach or things like that, it's because the water coming in and out from the storm drains and stuff, people will dig a small little line so that water can travel down to the beach and they think it's funny. And within a couple months, it's this huge pit that has been eroded away into a giant crevice that's dangerous with very fast moving water. These things, people, I swear, they don't use their brain. They just accept anything they're told by basic media. And the thing, there's so many things about the pyramids that make absolutely no sense. I mean, none whatsoever. Look at the recent team. I believe they were hold on, I had it right here. Yeah, the Italian scientists. Okay, there is a team of Italian scientists, you guys, who recently did a new type. I'm sorry about that. A new type of scan of the pyramids, more specifically under the pyramids. Now, I don't claim to understand this technology, you guys, but it has to do with this type of technology has to do with satellites and lidar type stuff and Doppler technology, all kinds of technology. I'm not going to pretend I understand it. But what these scientists did is they said that they were able to scan under the pyramids, and they are the ones who have found these giant structures leading down just about 2 miles, or just over 2 miles, one or the other, under the pyramid to another structure. And they don't know if these pillars are all wrapped with a staircase or if it's coils or what it is. And they're actually doing a peer review study on the technology that they used right now. They're awaiting the completed version of a peer review, which is going on right now for their technology that they used. The first one out there, Dr. Hawass is the first one out there saying, oh, this technology is bull. And people have called him on it, including Joe Rogan and many others. Graham Hancock was one of the people who called him out on it. Um, he just dismisses things with no proof. That doesn't, and that doesn't work. And they go, well, do you know anything about technology? He goes, no, but I spoke to people who do the lidar. It's not even close to the same technology. It's really not. And they just dismiss it out of hand because it's a new technology. Well, if you do that, you risk looking a fool when we make these types of discoveries. And so a few years back, they made the discovery. They printed out all these photos of there's what their scans showed. And people started saying, well, how do you know your scans are accurate? And they showed some of these chambers that they did scan that are known chambers inside and under the pyramid. And the scans are completely accurate. But people are saying, well, there's a water shelf you hit, and it probably just did something weird to your scans, or, I mean, all manner of ways to try to dismiss this just offhand. I'm really looking forward to the peer review on this coming out so that we know what's going on. But on top of that, and more than that, I'm really looking forward to it now that they've just recently announced they found a hidden chamber inside, I'm sorry, underneath the Sphinx that they've said wasn't there for decades now, over 60 years. There was a person, I believe it was in the 1930s, who surmised that there was a hidden chamber underneath the Sphinx, and everybody called BS on it, you guys. Now we find out it's there. This gives even more credence to the fact that there could be other hidden structures underneath these giant structures of the pyramids. Who built them and why? Was this an advanced civilization that was here pre us? Was it another human civilization that had just gotten way more advanced than us that was wiped out by a cataclysm roughly 12,000 years ago? Graham Hancock says that he believes there was actually a large meteor asteroid strike that did a lot of damage to the peoples of the world and eliminated this advanced society, or at least mostly, the survivors of which went around the world trying to share their knowledge, which explains why there is so much similar architecture around the world. Some people believe that they had use of advanced tools and advanced machinery, either given to them by some kind of extra dimensional space based intelligence, someone who's not us. So I look forward to, getting some more info on this when it comes out about these scans, and I will share more with you then. But I'm going to cut it short for now. I'm going to go enjoy some family time. Once again, I appreciate all of you watching me here at Straight Jacket White Rabbit. Um, Kudos and thanks to everyone who hits the like, share, or subscribe button. It really helps me out with YouTube's algorithm. So for now, I'm going to cut it off and I'm going to say good night, good luck, and much love from Straight Jacket White Rabbit.